Welcome to How to Homeschool Radio, the show where we help new and veteran homeschoolers create a successful homeschool that works for their families. Whether you're thinking about homeschooling, just started homeschooling, or have been homeschooling for years, you've come to the right place. I'm your host, Judy Sardin, homeschooling coach, homeschooling mom of two, and author of Sardin's Practical Guide, How to Start Homeschooling. Are you ready? Let's get to it. Hey, welcome to part 2 of How to Homeschool. And today we are going to talk about making an assessment of your child before you begin homeschooling. We are going to talk about setting a schedule that works for your family. And we are going to talk about, yes, you do have patience to homeschool, because a lot of people think they can't homeschool because they feel like they don't have the patience to do so. And I'm here to debunk that myth and get you on your way to homeschooling your kids. So let's jump right into it. First off, making an assessment before you begin homeschooling your child. I recommend this to everybody. Now, think about this. Your kid's been in school. Grades come back to you to tell you how well your kids are doing in school. The child's teachers have told you how they are doing in school, but you have not been there. You have no idea. I will give you an example. My son is a horrible test taker, and I administer his tests, his standardized tests. In Georgia, you do not have to test every year, but I do, just so they can get the practice. So they take either the SAT, the Stanford Achievement Test, or the ITBS. We've just switched actually to the ITBS, the Iowa Test of Basic Skills. So they take this test, and if you have a degree, which I have, you can administer the test to your own child. And so I choose to do paper and pencil just because my son's had some vision issues, and I think paper and pencil is better than the computer. Okay, so I administer the test, and I sit there and I watch him take the test. The guy cannot stay focused, although he's getting better. I have to say he's getting better. He's going to 7th grade. He's much better today than he was, say, 4 years ago. But I would sit there and I would watch him not be able to stay on task. And once we switched over to the Iowa, which is a timed test, I was doing the Stanford because it was not timed, and he had the vision issues, and he just needed to be able to take his time. But now that he's gotten older, I've switched to Iowa. And I sit there and I watch him, and he just has really poor time management skills. And so, the buzzer beeps, the 1 minute buzzer beeps, and he's only covered like half of the questions, and the other half is blank. And then, obviously, he doesn't finish. He leaves half the section blank, and his scores reflect thus. So, if I'm a parent, say you're the parent, your kid was at school, they did this very similar thing, and you get their test scores, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, the teacher is telling you how horrible your kid's test scores are. Your kid feels horrible. He doesn't remember, by the time you get those test scores back, he doesn't remember that he left half the section blank. All you know is that you've got a big fat, 50 or whatever raw score because the kid left half of it blank. But all you know is that he got a 50 on his test score. You have no idea what happened during the testing. You have no idea what happened, what was going on in the environment. You have no idea any of this stuff. And so that is the sort of thing that you just don't know about when you get the test scores back from your teacher. That's the sort of thing that you don't find out about ever. All you have the bad test score. So what I'm trying to convey to you is that when you get an assessment from the school, you have to take it with a grain of salt because you don't know what else happened. I know for certain that even though my child got a 50 on that section, I know that his reading comprehension skills are superior. And the reason I know that is not just because I'm bragging, it's because of the vision issues. He's been tested outside of the standardized testing, and he scores very high. He scores grade levels ahead. So I know that he has high reading comprehension, but you would never know if you looked at his test scores from a timed test. Okay? So by administering that test myself, I know a couple of things. I know that from a test skills taking standpoint, he's got some test taking skills that he needs to learn before he has to start taking big tests, like the PSAT and the SAT and the ACT. And so I know that we can work on that. And I also know that he, not so much now as he used to be, but he's highly distractible. So if anything is going on in his environment, he used to find it hard to focus. Now he can do it more. He can do it more readily, and he can stay on task. But that was the case at one point. So I recommend that everybody do their own assessment of their children. Yeah, you've got what the teachers told you, but do your own. Whether it's doing it through, doing it yourself by administering a test at home, or whether it's getting a third party to test your child. There are several places that will test homeschooling children. There are several people who you can reach out to who can test them for minimal cost. And I recommend that you do this yourself, because you may find that deficiencies that the teachers, the school said that your kid has, they really don't have them, or they may not be to the extent that the school attempted to represent it. So that is the first and foremost thing that I suggest to everyone. Have your child assessed independently. Now, those tests that I was just telling you about, I ordered the test, and it is less than $100 for both of my kids. So I was able to test them and see where they were, and you can do the same thing with your kids. I suggest you administer the test if you can. If not, you can have, there are people, like I'm certified to administer the test to people. I don't do it, but I can do it. There are other homeschooling parents and teachers who can administer the test one-on-one to your child. And if there's anything going on in the environment or during the actual testing, they can tell you what that is, and then you can take the test and kind of evaluate it within those facts. So definitely assess your child, because then when you're trying to figure out again what your curriculum is going to be for, say, reading, you kind of know where your child is, and you've learned that independently. I think that schools can be very biased. If you have a child that has struggled, they are going to view that child through the struggling lens. If you have a child who may be bright, but was what they considered a behavioral issue, they are going to, anything that you get from that school is going to be colored through the behavioral issues lenses. And so, again, just because there's so much bias and there's so much going on in the school environment, they're really like miniature politics going on, even among the teachers as regards to certain students. I say do your own assessment before you decide where your child needs the most help. The second thing is, okay, so you've done your assessment. Now, the second thing you need to do is kind of look at why you're homeschooling. Because why you're homeschooling is going to determine what curriculum you use. And if you haven't listened to episode 1 where I talk about curriculum, choosing a curriculum within the context of your family, what your family, whether you work or what your family lifestyle is. But now I'm talking about choosing a curriculum based on why you're homeschooling. So let's take some examples. You may be homeschooling your child because the school told you that they were behind in XYZ subject, maybe all of them. So you are homeschooling your child so that you can go slowly so that you can get them up to speed. So you might want to choose a curriculum that's maybe a grade behind or 2 grades behind, just so you can make sure you filled gaps, and then you can move fast on the things that they know and move slow on the gaps so you can bring them up to speed. So if you're homeschooling a child who's behind, your curriculum selections are going to be totally different than a parent who's homeschooling their kid because their kid is bored and they are advanced in all the subjects. And so they need to find a a curriculum that's, a grade or two ahead. Or like me, you could have a child who is right at grade level in some things and well above grade, several grade levels above in other things. In that case, like I do, I choose the appropriate level for each subject where my child is. When my child had reading issues, I didn't get history and science. That was behind. I kept him on grade, and I simply read it to him and did oral testing, if you want to call it test. I basically just asked him a bunch of questions. So, with homeschooling, when you're looking at curriculum, the beauty of homeschooling is that everything can be customized to you and your children. So if say you're homeschooling because your child has a medical issue, if your child has a medical issue, if my child has a medical issue, I'm not going to be concerned with rushing grade levels ahead, especially if some children have chronic diseases and they just need some time. They're having a lot of hospital visits, and you just need them to stay on grade level. But the most important thing, your highest priority, is that your child get well. And so if I know for the next year I'm going to be in and out of the hospital, I'm going to be running here, I'm going to be running there, I'm going to get a curriculum that's going to not stress my child out. I'm going to get a curriculum that's going to keep my child in school. I'm going to get a curriculum that will make sure I'm meeting my state standards. But I'm not going to get one that's going to stress my child out, because the primary focus is my child getting well. So when you're thinking about, and the assessment that hopefully you do will also help, because if you've been told your child is behind and you find out, well, you know what, actually he's not behind, then if you've done the assessment, then you can get the appropriate curriculum for where they are. If your child is gifted, but then you discover, actually, he is gifted in 2 subjects, but he's not gifted in the other 3, you can get the curricula that is appropriate for each level or each subject. So that's why it's so important to do an assessment, but it's also why it's so important to understand what your goal is for homeschooling. Because your goal could be, you could have 2 different goals for 2 different kids. You could have a kid, say you have a kid that's been bullied. Well, your first year homeschooling is probably going to be focused on finding appropriate and positive social interactions for your child. So you're going to be looking at joining homeschooling groups, church groups. You're going to be looking at rehabilitating that kid's self-esteem, that kid's self-worth. You're going to be working on that. That is going to be your sole priority that first year if you've got a child that's been just suffering under bullying. Yes, academics are important, but again, what's more important? Stressing the kid out with high academics, or making sure you're meeting your state standards, making sure he's getting his work, but most importantly, organizing proper, positive social interactions for the child, where you have to be extremely intentional. That's where you're going to spend most of your energy in creating these opportunities for your child. So again, homeschooling is so wonderful because it really allows you to think about what you're doing and why you're doing it and what works best for you and for your family. So that's one of the awesome things about homeschooling. That's the second thing that you want to think about. And then the last thing is, in this broadcast, I'm going to do one more how to start homeschooling broadcast, so make sure you catch that one. And that is, oh my gosh, I hear this all the time. I hear this when I'm traveling around the country. You know what? I really want to homeschool, but I just don't have the patience. I'm just not a patient person. So let me just tell you this. I'm totally type A. I was a corporate attorney for 20 years. I don't suffer fools easily. I'm not a patient person, but guess what? I homeschool my kids, and they would agree with you. They would tell you that I'm not the most patient person. They'll tell you that I'm sarcastic. In fact, Yeah. So they will tell you that I'm sarcastic. They will tell you that, but they will also tell you unequivocally that their mama loves them, because I do. And they know that I do. And I might yell at them like right now. And 5 minutes later, we're snuggling on the couch and I'm doing a read aloud. And so I would say that when you are at home with your kids, and it's kind of hard to imagine, especially if the only school kind of interaction you've had with your kid is doing homework in the evening when you've had your day all day, you're tired and exhausted. They are tired and exhausted. And you're basing your experience on doing homework on kind of that interaction. I'd say you can't base it on that. Now, if you're saying, I work full time and that's the only time I would be able to homeschool, I hear you, but it's going to be different. You know why? Because your kid hasn't been sitting in school building all day. You've been at work, but your kid has either been working independently with the sitter and they have a few questions that they need help with, or they've been at the sitters all day and they haven't been doing any school at all. And so it's going to be a totally different game than when you've both been out all day and you're both exhausted and they've been doing school all day and they're resentful that they have to do more school now that they're home. I mean, I would be pissed off. I mean, honestly, if I've been at work for 7 hours a day, 8 hours a day, and then I've got to come home and put in 3 or 4 more hours of work and I just want to relax, I would be upset too. So, so if you're that parent that has to work full time, don't think that gives you a bye, because it doesn't. So, but here's what I say about that. I say that you have to, when you're homeschooling, you must adjust your expectations. So a couple things. Let's talk about kindergartners and reading. Everything tells you, their kids are supposed to be able to read by the time they're in kindergarten, or they're supposed to read by the time they're in first grade. Well, my son didn't really start reading well. He could read by the time he was 4, but with the vision issues, he regressed. And it took us years to get him back to where he was. He really didn't start reading well till he was 10. 10. So if he had been in a school, he would have been in special classes. He would have been told, he's behind, blah, 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 yada, yada. But for 10 years, and it took him 10 years to read. But what did I do? We just worked at it. We worked at it every day. We worked at it every day. I got the vision issues taken care of. I was told everything's a go, we're good. And we just worked at it every day. I had to adjust my expectations. And so that's what this is about. When I'm talking about having patience, I'm talking about adjusting your expectations. If you adjust your expectations, you can find the patience. I had to adjust my expectations that my child should be reading well before 6 years old, and simply adjust my expectations to he's improving. And then I looked up, and the guy will pick up a 300-page book and read it without any help from me. He's fine. I didn't think I would ever get to this, because he's 12 now and it took us a long time to get to it. But by adjusting my expectation that he will eventually learn how to read, I'm not frustrated at 8 that he's not reading like the school said he should be reading, because I know that we're working on it and I've adjusted my expectation. And so, that expectation adjustment must happen. And once it happens, if you're a neat freak and you want your house to be perfectly clean all day, every day, and you're homeschooling 2 or 3 kids, let me tell you what, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It will be better if you teach the children how to do chores and teach them how to pick up behind themselves. But guess what? If you've got 5 people in the house all day, every day, house is not going to be spick and span and perfect the way it was when you're at home by yourself all day. It's just not going to be. You must adjust your expectations. And so having the patience to homeschool means adjusting your expectations about so many things. People think it's going to be all rosy and sunny every day. Well, it's not. School isn't. You're pulling them out of school because school isn't perfect. You're pulling them out of school because they're having probably more bad days than they are good days. most people who homeschool do have more good days than bad days. So, but you may have a bad day. No, you will have a bad day. You will have a bad week, and you may have a bad month. But when you're homeschooling, it gets better. When you're homeschooling, you build relationships with your children that you can't even imagine if you're not home. If your children are going to a brick and mortar school, you can't imagine the types of relationships that you can build with your children when you are at home with them all day, every day. The siblings tend to have a better relationship. I can take my kids to any gathering. Homeschool families have a broad range of kids. Usually, if you go to any homeschooling event, you're going to find nursing infants all the way up to high schoolers. And everybody plays together. There's I don't play with little kids, because everybody has siblings and everybody plays with their siblings. And so if you're going to play with Johnny and Johnny's got to play with his 5-year-old brother, then you play with Johnny's 5-year-old brother too. And so it's really amazing how the things that you kind of frame in your mind when your child is in a brick and mortar school, they just turn out so totally differently when you're homeschooling. And so it's all about changing expectations for what you are expecting. It's not going to be guns. It's not going to be, roses and sunshine every day. It's not. You're going to have days when all you want to do is tell those children to go someplace and never come back. You will have those. I have days when the moment my husband walks in the door, I go to my room and I close the door. And I dare either of my children to walk in those doors for the rest of the evening. Really, I do have those days, but most of my days, absolutely most of my days, we're good, we're happy, and I know 100% that I am providing a better education for my children than they would be getting in a brick and mortar school, for so many reasons. So adjusting your expectations will mean you have more patience, but you don't have to be perfect. Nobody's perfect. If you yell at your kids, it's not the end of the world. You're yelling at them now, right? You yell at your kids now. So what's the difference? The only difference is you're yelling at them, and then 10 minutes later you're snuggling on the couch, or you're making a meal together, or you've moved on to something else, and it's not the end of the world. If you lose your patience with your children, you're doing that now anyway. So it's not going to change. And setting a schedule is easy because you kind of did it. If you listen to part 1, you kind of already set your schedule because you've kind of done an assessment of where your family is, whether you're working full time, whether you're working part-time, or even if you're full-time stay at home, if you've got other stuff to do. You've already kind of thought about your schedule before you even chose your curriculum. So set that schedule, set it up, and know that it will change, probably will, once you kind of get into it. A lot of things change, but you've got to, again, adjust your expectations, understand that things likely will change. But as the kids get older, as things pop up, oh my gosh, you've got a parent that was fine, but now they need help. You've got to go to another state and lug the kids with you and their school books, but that's okay. You can do it. And so setting a schedule, just know that it's going to be fluid. And you can set it for this year, and it might work really well this year, but the next year you might have totally different things. Both of my kids are competitive athletes, and so last year was a nightmare. I was driving an hour every single day to both ways now, or both ways. So it's 2 hours on the road every single day to get to hours-long practices. It was a nightmare. We had to cut back this year because I just can't do it. So, everything changes from year to year, and it's okay, and be okay with that. And be okay with saying no. Be okay if you've overextended yourself and cutting back. And so setting your schedule is all about you. It's all about what's working for your family. Okay, so we've got one more broadcast about how to homeschool. And again, I do homeschool coaching. So if you need any help getting going, just contact me with the link in the notes, and I'll see you on the next broadcast. Hey, one more thing before you go. As a valued member of How to Homeschool Radio, I want to help you and hear from you not only when you're listening to the show, but all day, every day. I have a new Facebook group called How to Homeschool, and it's a place where you can get together with other homeschooling families to get support, offer support, and interact real time to homeschooling issues that are most important to you. If you want to be a part of this growing community, see the latest videos, and get live answers to your homeschooling questions, go to judysarden.com/homeschool podcast. Or you can just hop onto Facebook and search for How to Homeschool under groups. Drop me a note to let me know when you join. I can't wait to see you there.